she survived a car crash, but woke up as a spy who vanished in 1944. The villagers fear her name, and the past refuses to let her go. Danielle jolted awake in the middle of a dense forest. Her head throbbed, and a small cut on her leg stung. All she remembered was her car going over a cliff on the way home. Yet here she was in a strange, silent wood. A chilling wind blew through the trees as she called for help, her voice swallowed by the stillness. On the ground nearby, she noticed a scattering of old photographs. She picked one up, a young girl smiling, wearing a heart-shaped necklace identical to the one around Danielle's neck. As she picked up more photos, a deep sense of dread washed over her. In every single picture, the woman looked just like her. Frightened, she stumbled out of the woods and into a small, desolate village. She saw an old man sitting on his porch, but as soon as he saw her, his face went ashen. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Danielle said, her voice shaking. "I just woke up in the forest." "What happened?" The old man didn't answer. He simply got up and ran. The other villagers she encountered reacted the same way. They all seemed to know her, yet they were terrified. She walked on until she found an old, abandoned schoolhouse. Inside, a mural on the wall caught her attention. It was a painting of her face. Below it, in faded script, were the words, "Lily has vanished." Confused and desperate, Danielle ran to the village well. She looked into the murky water and saw her reflection. But it wasn't the fresh cut on her leg that stood out. It was a large, jagged scar across her face, a scar that was completely healed. Yet she had no memory of getting it. She stared at the reflection, utterly horrified and lost. The sight of the healed scar shattered Danielle's sense of reality. "Lily?" the name echoed in her mind. Was she Lily? And if so, who was Danielle? Driven by a desperate need for answers, she re-entered the dusty schoolhouse. Among the scattered desks, she found a small, tarnished metal box. It was old and locked, but a weak hinge allowed her to pry it open. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, lay a small, carefully folded piece of silk. Danielle unfolded it, revealing a pattern of tiny pinpricks. The dots and dashes seemed to form a code. A flash of memory sparked in her mind, a fragment of a story she had read about a WWII spy who used a similar method to hide her secrets. Could her lost memory be tied to a hidden mission? A secret past she couldn't remember? Fear mixed with a newfound determination. She had to understand this. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around to see the old man from before standing in the doorway. His face was no longer filled with terror, but with a hesitant recognition. "Lily?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Is it really you?" I don't know," Danielle stammered. "Everyone looks at me like I'm a ghost. Who is Lily? What happened to her?" The old man stepped closer, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. "We thought you were gone for good, child. Vanished, all those years ago." He pointed a trembling hand at the silk in her hand. "That, Lily," he said, his voice low, "is a long and dangerous story. Oh, a story we thought was buried forever." The old man, whose name was Henry, took a deep breath. His eyes fixed on the silk in Danielle's hand. That was Lily's secret. A secret from a time when we were all living in shadows. He led her out of the schoolhouse and to a small, secluded hut at the edge of the village. Inside, the walls were covered with old maps and faded documents. Henry pointed to a large map of Normandy, France from the 1940s. "This village," he said, tapping a small dot on the map, "was a key point for the French resistance during the war. We helped hide agents sent by the British, people who risked their lives to fight the Nazis. Lily was one of them." Danielle's heart pounded. The story was starting to make sense, but it raised more questions than answers. "But she's my age." This was decades ago. "She wasn't," Henry said softly. "Lily was just 23 when she was sent here. She was a master of disguise, a ghost who rode a bicycle through these very streets, pretending to be a simple country girl selling soap. She gathered intelligence on German, troop movements and radioed it back to the Allies." Henry explained that Lily was a genius with codes and technology, trained by the British Special Operations Executive, SOE. She had a personal vendetta against the Nazis who had killed her family. Her mission was to gather information for D-Day. He said she was chosen because no one would suspect a young woman like her. The silk in Danielle's hand was her coded notebook, marked with pinpricks for each message she sent. "She was brilliant," Henry continued, a look of pride in his eyes. "But on her last mission, She went to a place called the Black Forest, a heavily guarded Nazi camp nearby. She was supposed to retrieve something, a new type of radio signal scrambler the Germans were working on. She never came back. Danielle's head reeled. The Black Forest. The name felt familiar, a faint shiver running down her spine. So, if I'm Lily, what happened to me? How am I still here? And why don't I remember any of this? Henry looked at her with a solemn expression. That is the greatest mystery of all. Lily, we found you years later, in the same spot where you woke up today. But you were different. You had no memory of us, of your mission, of anything. You looked like you, but you were someone else. We thought you were a curse, an echo of the past come back to haunt us. He looked at her, his expression a mix of awe and fear. You vanished and you were found. But not as the person you were. Henry's words hung in the air, chilling Danielle to the bone. She wasn't just a stranger. She was a forgotten ghost of the past. The scar on her face, the coated silk. The villagers' fear, it all made a terrible sort of sense. She was Lily, a spy from a long-lost war, somehow returned to the present with no memory of her mission or her identity. The Black Forest, Danielle said. The name feeling like a piece of a puzzle she couldn't quite see. What was it? Henry's face darkened. It was a German research camp. A place where they experimented with new technologies. We thought it was just a radio signal jammer. But Lily's last message, it spoke of something far more dangerous. She said they had created a temporal distortion field. It sounded like madness. But Lily was never wrong about her intelligence. Danielle shivered. A temporal distortion field? It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. Could that be what happened to her? Could she have somehow been thrown through time? After the war, the Allies investigated the camp, Henry continued. But they found nothing. The camp was gone, wiped off the map. Everyone assumed it was a hoax, a final message meant to confuse. But then you reappeared, decades later, looking exactly the same, with no memory. A new question formed in Danielle's mind, one that made her heart pound. If I was gone for so long, what happened to the person I thought I was? The person who lived in the city, who drove the car that went off the cliff? Henry sighed, the sadness in his eyes deepening. We don't know, Lily. Maybe your mind created a new life to cope with the trauma. Maybe it was a part of the temporal effect. All we know is that you are here now, and you are Lily. The truth was terrifying. Danielle felt like she was trapped in a nightmare. She looked at the coated silk in her hand. The pinpricks now feeling like a key to a past she was too scared to unlock. But with fear came a sudden surge of determination. She had to know. She had to go back to the Black Forest. Danielle returned to the village well, her hand clenching the coated silk. The words of the old man echoed in her mind. You vanished and you were found. But not as the person you were. The scar on her face felt like a brand of a past she couldn't escape. There was only one way to know the truth. She had to go back to the Black Forest. She returned to Henry's hut and found a hand-drawn map, tucked into one of the old documents. It was marked with a rough path leading to a clearing deep in the woods, the site of the old Nazi research camp. As she walked, the air grew thick and heavy. The birdsong faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The trees seemed to grow twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers. Finally, she arrived at the clearing. All that remained was a small, rusted piece of equipment, half buried in the ground. It was an old radio antenna. As she got closer, she felt a strange, tingling sensation, like static electricity. She reached out and touched the antenna. A blinding flash of white light consumed her. She felt herself being pulled in a million directions at once. The world spun, and a torrent of images flashed through her mind. A younger version of herself in a spy's uniform. A German soldier running. A hurried transmission of a coded message. The feeling of a bright light and a deafening roar as a temporal field activated. Then, darkness. She jolted awake. The air was cool and crisp, but the eerie silence was gone, replaced by the chirping of birds. Her head throbbed, and a small cut on her leg stung. She was in a dense forest. Her heart pounded as she looked down at her hands. They were clean. Without the scar, the coated silk was gone. She stumbled out of the woods and into the small village. An old man sat on his porch, but his face was not filled with fear. It was just a simple, curious expression. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked. I think so," Danielle said, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. She felt a strange familiarity with this place, but she couldn't explain why. I think I just got in a car accident. I was on my way home." She looked at her reflection in the village well. Her face was perfect, unmarked by any scar. She felt a profound sense of disorientation, a sense of having lived a life that wasn't her own. She was back, but how? And what was the life she had lived for the past few decades? She began to walk toward the main road, the feeling of déjà vu overwhelming her. As she did, a small worn photograph caught her eye on the ground. She picked it up. It was a picture of a young girl with a heart-shaped necklace. She stared at it, a single tear rolling down her cheek. The girl in the photo was smiling, but her eyes held a secret that Danielle, for the moment, had completely forgotten. The mystery wasn't solved. It was a loop. Danielle was a ghost in her own timeline, destined to repeat the same events, lost between her two lives, forever vanished and found.